This is Thoughts That Rock. Now, here are your hosts, Jim Knight and Brant Menswar.
What's happening, peeps? Thoughts That Rock, your favorite podcast, coming to you from the road this week. We are in different places, and so enjoying the beauty of technology and Riverside FM. Thank you for making it all possible. But we are the podcast that gives you 3 pieces of advice centered around a particular topic or subject. Today we have an amazing conversation. Jim, tell them what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how to develop new leaders. And again, I think you'll probably hear this at the end of the interview, you know, regardless of whether you think you're a leader or you're on the other side and you're obviously being exposed to different leaders out there. I think there's going to be something for everybody in there. We do talk quite a bit about different ways to develop people, but that's what our goal is. And so, you know, we're pretty happy to find a great friend of ours who is running this amazing podcast called Be Best You. Brant, you and I have both been on that show, and Coach John Hughes, who is not only the host of that show, this guy has been a good, dear friend of ours. He's a big fan of ours. He's basically, though, a 40-year veteran in the quick casual, I would say. I would use that terminology in the restaurant industry. You know, at 19 years old, he started at the very first Mike's Sub. And if Mike's Subs sounds familiar to you, that's really the precursor to Jersey Mike's, which has like over 2,500 units or something like that. He's been there, you know, forever in a bunch of different roles. But now he's the senior VP and brand ambassador, and he's in charge of all the learning and the coaching and the culture, and sort of reminds me a little bit of my career at Hard Rock. But, you know, the guy's super, super smart, had a lot to share about how to develop new leaders. And we had a few laughs along the way. And man, we had fun, right?
100%. Yeah, we had an amazing conversation with John. You guys are going to love it. Check this out.
There he is. Boom. What's up, John?
Not much, guys. How are you? Appreciate you having me on. It's an honor, honestly, really. Thank you.
Same here, man. Same here. We were just saying in the introduction about how both of us have been on your show, and we've been wanting you to get on ours for a while now, and we're lucky to have Coach Hughes with us. So thanks, buddy. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and it was awesome having both of you guys on there and sharing your book and your thoughts. And I'm looking forward to. I know, Jim, you have your third one, and I think Brant, you have one coming out as well, right? Another one. So
we'll see.
There you go.
He's always got one in the hopper.
I'm waiting till my arm is twisted just a little bit more, and then we'll see what
we all
happens.
have a book in us, right? So
That's right.
Somewhere.
If it was free,
We
you
all
probably
have
already
a
have
book
it out.
in us. Not necessarily a good book in us.
Yeah,
So
mine's
we've
going to be a
already got
coloring
good
book.
out.
So coloring book is mine, but
That's right.
Well, John, I know you're working on one too, right? I think you said you probably have one possibly by next year is what you're thinking.
yeah, I need something has to happen. I mean, I talked about it so much that you know, it's the crying wolf thing, and it's just a matter of just pulling the trigger and deciding what it's going to be about. And I have some ideas, keeping it simple. What I do love is, you know, a lot of the books, even yours, Jim, is it's you know, it could be a series, it could just be about one particular topic, but it's coming soon.
Awesome, man. Well, when we get to that point, we'll definitely have some conversations. But today, man, we're so thrilled because I know this is right up your alley. It's what you do for a living at this point, and it's how to develop new leaders. And so, you know, we want to jump right in because I know you probably have way more than 3 thoughts on this, but hopefully we've been able to truncate it down to the best pieces of advice on how to do that. What is your first thought that rocks on how to develop new leaders, brother?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we have franchisees that come in, and obviously they have the leadership traits, and then they have managers in the business that in the restaurant service industry, you know, a lot of these people, I call us the misfits of the business world because they don't have the aptitude or the resource to go to college. Maybe they don't have a trade, so they end up in this middle area, and you know, they end up working really hard, and then through working hard, they're given these opportunities, and then all of a sudden, hard workers are put in a position of authority, which is the management position and or leadership position. And then they're just being asked to lead. And what I've learned is that, you know, they don't know how to do it, and they're learning on the job. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned in almost my 40 years of doing this is the best way to create leaders is to create them before they're in the position of being a leader. So you take that 14-year-old employee that's the first time they ever get a job. What I try to convince our franchisees and our managers is, don't ask if they want to be a leader someday. Just start teaching them the qualities of leadership, the traits of leadership, the behaviors of leadership, and at least explain to them what it looks like, so that when they're in that position, it's not foreign to them. It's somewhat familiar. I always use this analogy of like captains of teams. If you ask a person who's a captain of a team, if they knew how to be a captain before they got that position, they look at you funny, and then they're like, well, no, that to me is crazy. So I have this, if I have this opportunity in life, what I would tell any coach, anybody, that you teach leadership at the fundamental levels, the basic fundamental levels. So leadership should start, at the walking, at the walking level. That's where I see our best successes in our companies, when they've adopted that approach.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny because, Brant knows this. I've got this nice, bookcase of books behind me. I probably have, 1,000 books over there. And it's not a single one of them are fiction. They're all nonfiction. They're boring business books, but that's just how my mind is. That was my career. You and I sort of follow the same career, John. And I think, I've learned over the years that at least in a corporate America position, I always felt like if you had to go to the outside to bring somebody in to be a leader, to be a manager, to be even a general manager, if you have to do it, then shame on you. You choose to do it because you want new blood, you want different ideas. But your sports analogy is perfect too. I think you've got to have a AAA ball club ready to go at all times, so that you're deciding to go to the outside. The goal should be 100% internal promotions within reason, but you ought to have a ton of people ready to go. And it's not that you're waiting for them to tap you on the shoulder and go, hey, I'm ready to be developed now. You should just start developing people. And so people that read the business books, they're voracious readers, or they're on podcasts, or they go out of their way to go to courses and classes, they're definitely going to get a leg up. Love that mug. A little bit of branding there. Thank you, brother. But I think, you're making a great point. And I knew when I was working at Hard Rock, working with our corporate university, you have to go out there and just find those high potentials and start carving them out of the stone right now, so that they're ready to go, whether they choose to do it or not.
What if we can create some type of roadmap for people who don't have the intention of being a leader at some point, but how do we give them those traits, those points along the way that they can be somewhat familiar with? And I don't see that happening enough. And to me, it's almost, I hate the word common sense, because that's not very common, but it makes sense, right? To do that.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, John, it makes me think of a couple different things. One with Nick Saban, one of my favorite quotes from coaches is, if you're not coaching, you're letting it happen. Right. And so when you're developing leaders, you have to think of it that way, that if you're just going to let it happen, then they're going to be underprepared when it's time for them to step up. And so I combine that with, there's really only 3 ways to change beliefs. And the first way is to sort of acknowledge proof that you have done something similar in the past. And that is exactly what we're talking about here, is that if you start teaching them before they're in that position, when they get to that position, you don't have to convince them that they're capable. You can simply have them acknowledge the proof that they've done something similar already, and they are prepared to be in that moment. And that's, I think, is a really underserved part of leadership, because you're not just building leaders, you're actually helping the organization by having people ready to go when the opportunity arises, as opposed to being in a panic or promoting somebody who's not quite ready, or having to go outside the organization to look for talent. It's really something that I wish more leaders would understand. You're actually serving both the people and the organization at the same time when you take that approach.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this idea that the best players are typically the captains. But the captains, should be the ones developing people to be the best of their versions, right? And I look at my daughter; she was blessed with the physical abilities, the athletic abilities to every team she was on, whether she was a freshman or, point guard, center, mid, and soccer. So those are captain leader positions on the field. And for me, I always felt like, my style of leadership should have been her style. And I happen to know the young lady, captain of the women's soccer team, Christy Rampone, and I went to her and said, Mickey's not in the huddle. She's not talking on the field. And Christy mentioned to me, she said, let Mickey find her voice. And I was like, what do you mean? And what was really cool about that, to your point, is, if you teach them those things to recognize and then give them the space to grow and find their own leadership style. So as my daughter, she became a better soccer player, more experienced on the field. But then all of a sudden, by the time she was a senior, you can see that she was comfortable in that role. Yeah. And I see the reason I think it's important to develop leadership skills is a lot of the people that I train are thrust into that role. They're going to take it because they're making more money. They're getting more prestige. And then they fail. And then we're like, well, wait, they didn't fail. We failed them by, I again, it's just these little analogies. And I just say, we give the keys to our $1 million businesses, our $350,000 Ferraris, to somebody who has a license. And then when they crash the car, we yell at them.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a Honda and a Ferrari. And that's what leadership is. You're driving a Ferrari, right?
Yep.
But
hope. You hope.
And just to double check, I mean, I've heard you say that this phrase before, that in your mind, leadership isn't a position, right? It's a responsibility. Does that sort of encapsulate this first thought? I know you're talking about building the bench strength, not waiting on people to maybe come to you to be developed, but you start going after them now. What is, if you were to truncate it down, what would that first thought be, just to wrap that up?
You know what? I've been spending a lot of time around this word lately, professionalism. And, a lot of people look at leadership and they think of, well, I'll ask 50 people in a classroom, how many of you guys have worked in professional jobs before? And only 5 or 6 people will raise their hand. The rest of them won't. And then I'll say, well, what constitutes professional? And they'll say a diploma, a 9 to 5, a suit. I'm like, okay, so working in a restaurant isn't professional? And they look at me funny and I go, well, it is. Right. But what does it mean to be a professional? And then the big part of it is, all of a sudden these young people will work hard. Somebody recognizes that, puts them in this position, but no one ever told them that the way they walked from their car to the restaurant, that being punctual, being on time just means you're not late. Your body language, so we spend a lot of time. I use the term button down. And I'm not talking about a certain look, but just being a leader. There's a responsibility when you're asking other people to do stuff that you have to do it. And I see a lot of people really kind of look at you kind of cockeyed and they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, leadership isn't a position. Leadership is a responsibility. And it's not, you can respect their position, but what you do in that position is going to earn the respect of others. Other than that, you're just a bully, a manager, a boss. So that's kind of where I've gotten that, I've figured that out, that a lot of them just don't really, a lot of young people don't understand. Well, it's not young people. A lot of people don't get that.
Yeah. Sure. It's funny, when I was working at Hard Rock, I remember clearly one time a guest had stopped me, and I was a host at that time, and they had been watching, it was a mezzanine floor. They'd been watching downstairs at this one person that was moving around, talking to everybody, the hosts, the expediter, the busters, definitely some guests along the way. And the guy was wearing plain clothes. You couldn't tell that he worked in the restaurant. Pretty young guy. And they stopped me and said, is that the general manager? And I said, that's actually our director of operations, who was just visiting. I hadn't seen that guy in 2 months. His name was Jamie Sterbino. And they said, he definitely is in charge. He's the leader of this place. I was like, yeah, but he was only here for one day. They're like, oh no, that guy's in charge. And sure enough, that's how Jamie was. And it was just, to your point, it was the way you carried yourself. It's how you interacted. It's how you are when you think no one's watching, but everybody's watching. Everybody sees what's going on. So
they are.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to have 2 parents in my life. I had a father. My mom was a music teacher, actually, so love music. And my dad was a gym teacher. So, and I know a lot of people that I come across or I'm in front of every day, they didn't either have both parents or parents at all, or if they had parents, they probably wish they didn't have them. So they don't have these role models. So no one teaches them to stand up when a lady walks in the room, or nobody teaches them to have that 360-degree vision and see that servient type of attitude. And we tell them to do this. We direct them to do this. We're we're telling and yelling. We're not teaching and coaching. And I didn't realize this when it was happening, but I had a mentor, the owner of our company, Peter Cancro, and he bought my first blue blazer. He taught us how to order wine. He taught us how to do all these things. And when I was happening to me, I was like, what are you doing? It's weird. And then I realized that, if I pay attention to why, I had to figure out the why on my own a lot. I figured that less people need to do that. So I'd not only teach them, but I'd also tell them the why. And a lot of what I see is, especially with the young managers today, is why do I have to tuck my shirt in? Why do I have to, if the meeting's at 11, I show up at 5 of, I'm not late. All these little things that we assume that people know, and then we put them in this position of holding other people accountable to the same things. And then when they fail at that, we lose them when they don't know. They really don't.
So brother, give us your second thought that rocks on this. Again, we're talking about how to develop new leaders.
Yeah. What I see is this whole idea of working smarter, not harder. And these guys are working their butts off, right? Especially through pandemic. And then now they're supposed to make smart decisions. And to your point about reading is, go get smarter, figure it out, or whatever. The working smarter, not harder piece is something that really resonates with a lot of the young. If it's not a book, it's audio. If it's not audio, it's a TED Talk. If it's not a TED Talk, go to a conference. So if you want it, you got to go. You got to make effort.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make you smarter. It's not my job. Yeah.
When you're saying, work smarter, not harder, but if I understood you correctly, I think it might not always be that exact phrase is the way that we always need to be working, because although I would say it'd be awesome if, let's say, the three of us all just continue to work smarter. I think that's definitely the goal, but there's a tremendous amount of hard work that goes into it. If I understood you correctly, you're saying kind of today you need to do both, which, by the way, is a super rare characteristic. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you kind of saying you need to do both these days, right?
Yeah, because if I said, if I talk to Peter, work smarter, not harder, I think you should learn to work smarter. And Peter would say, no, you always work hard. You never stop working hard. But the smarter part it just doesn't happen. It's learned, and you have to recognize it. And we want people to get smarter as quick as possible with the least amount of money and the best teacher's experience. So what teaches us, the most yet, it was a guy from Gallup said it once. He goes, people want to learn something. And when I tell them it's 3 days, they say, can we do it in 2? And when we say maybe, they say, good, you can do it in 1. So, it takes time. But if we could learn to always work hard and get smarter by making the effort, meaning don't tell me you can't read, because I couldn't. I'm dyslexic.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I'm ADD. So guess what? I told myself my whole life I couldn't read. But guess what? I just had to figure out how I read. I didn't read the way that guy read. Now, like you said, you look at my bookshelf, I'm a voracious reader. That's all I do. I don't remember what I read the first. I don't. I read a page. I couldn't tell you what I just read. What I've learned is I've learned to get smarter in the sense that by reading, I wasn't getting smarter. How I got smarter was I figured out how to. So, because people just give up. Oh, I can't do it.
Yeah. But it's still sticking inside your noggin. Like, it's still resonating with you. And Brant, I know you and I have talked about AI and all the technology that's here right now. There's no excuse for lack of getting information. Everything is now in your pocket, within your reach to pretty much learn everything. Maybe some soft skills you could get from a mentor, but Brant, you share that, because I know we've talked a lot about whether it's Chat GBT or anything else. Boy, you can learn just about anything these days.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, I got something completely different out of what John just said. So what I got out of this is that working smarter, not harder requires both people involved, requires leadership and the student, right? Mm-hmm. So when somebody asks about something like a P&L and you say, don't worry about it, you're not allowing them to work smarter. You're holding back a teachable moment.
Yeah.
And if you want people to work smarter as leaders, you got to be willing to teach so that they can gain the knowledge to be smart.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we pass that off. We don't want to spend the time. We don't feel like they've earned it, whatever that might look like. But if we really want people to work smarter, not harder, it requires both the teacher and student to participate and not just expecting people to go out on their own, because for all of the new AI tools that are out there, it's just one more way to learn something wrong and to learn how to do something that might not be actually what you want them to learn.
That's
So at least for the leaders that and the mentors that I've had, they've got a very distinctive way of teaching, right? And there's something that they have learned that they've taken from Jim, that was when I first started speaking, I had the ability to listen to what your experiences were. You walked me through, do this, don't do that. I've tried this. This is what happened to me. Doesn't mean you can't try it, but just know that I've walked that path and this was my experience. It wasn't work smarter and not harder. It was work both, but you were also willing to share the knowledge that allowed me to get smarter without actually doing the work. And I think that's the real takeaway for me here, is that you've got to be willing to give the knowledge so that they can do the right work and not just work really hard to learn something the wrong way, which is more often than not these days, in that, I want it now. It's this instant gratification. It's all this stuff that happens. It's great that they have the ambition to go and learn, but let's not send them on that way to learn something the wrong way. Let's actually take a moment to teach something that's going to make sense, and then direct that path for them. Use that, and that excitement, that their willingness to put in the work in the right way, to be able to say, go study this, go read this book, go do something that you are familiar with, so that you can follow up on that and continue on that conversation. Does that make sense where I'm coming from?
Yeah, it just happened yesterday. A kid wanted to learn about, we're working on just guiding him through writing a mission statement, right? So you got Stephen Covey, he's got all those. So I said, why don't you just 7 habits? He's like, I don't know, I'm not a good reader. I said, well, here's a video. Well, I don't have, I don't have a computer. I said, okay, well, you have your phone. Yeah. I go, well, and I'm like, all right, so you want to get smarter? He's like, yeah. I go, but you're not willing to do the work. I just gave you all the different things, not just one. I gave you 5 different options. So at this point, I don't think you really, want what you want. He kind of looked at me funny. He went, yeah. I said, so my job isn't to tell you what you want to hear. My job is to tell you what you're capable of. And all of a sudden they're just like, whoa, no one's ever told me that before. No one's ever said that I'm valuable or I'm worth it. And I'm like, guys, no one's going to make you smarter. That's why. Yeah. So it's the slide I use is work smarter, harder isn't wrong. And I put, but it's learn to work smarter. And that's on you. You need to learn to work smarter. Yeah. There's somebody out there that you knock on the door of anybody and say, hey, I want you to help me. 9 out of 10 people will invite you in.
Yeah, I love it.
But if you don't ask,
I love it.
You did.
Maybe
You've done it.
Maybe to combine the two. I know, John, in your world, again, I'm going back to my Hard Rock days in the corporate university, we were very deliberate about the classes that we were going to teach, because I wanted to not waste anybody's time. If there was something they could learn at the unit level, if they could get it through e-learning or video, then that was great. But the things that we specifically picked out were things that I wasn't sure would be taught consistently, or Brant, to your point, if they're going to be taught wrong somewhere else, let me get them all in a room where I can make sure that we're going to get it right. Or maybe something that required role play, like how to handle a guest complaint, or how to read a P&L. You actually do that class, and that's mind blowing for people. How to do a first time interview, how to coach and counsel an employee. Like, no one is teaching these things really at the unit level, unless you're just a phenomenal teacher already. The chances are slim to none. So, I think there's sort of a combination on both of those where you're giving people, it sounds like, Coach, so many opportunities for people, whether they're getting it back at the ranch or they're getting it when they come to spend some time with you. At least they've got that opportunity. And now they make a choice, to your point. They either want to be developed or they don't. And if they don't want to, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do, maybe to push a few buttons, but they're going to make or break their own career that way.
Yeah, and what we have this. So my week is evolved, but to you're 1,000 bazillion% correct in the sense that, my owner's not doing this or my franchisee doesn't do that. I said, okay, guess what? I just gave you the tools to do it yourself. And if I don't have the tools, here's 15 books, here's 2 websites, here's this podcast, here's this podcast. Yep. So stop blaming everybody else. And, you're not good enough, or no one told you to do this. No one taught this guy to do that. You got to go after it, man.
Well, you started to allude to your third one. Let bring us home, my friend. What is the third thought that rocks? You were talking about not teaching or coaching people the way that we were probably taught, or anybody was taught. Walk us through that.
Yeah, I think anybody that's good at something is going to ascend to a position where other people want to either learn from them, or they're going to be put in that position of teaching other people. And what happens is you start teaching people. I'll just bring a quick story, and then I'll kind of get my dad was a basketball coach. Basketball was my favorite sport. Unfortunately, I'm 5'7", so I ended up running, and that worked out for me some weird way. But I got my daughter's 7th grade class. I mean, 7 years old. I'm teaching her basketball. It's her and her 5 friends, rec basketball, and I'm all excited. I'm a coach for the first time, official title of a coach, and I'm standing in front of these 5 girls, and I was like, I didn't know what to do. So I made them run. And it's a funny story, but at that moment I went, oh my goodness, I've been coached my whole life. I grew up, in a baby carriage at my dad's basketball practice. So I've been around coaching. So I just assumed I could coach. I didn't understand, and this is probably going to be my first book, to be honest with you, is steps that you should take in order to coach. Just sewing coach in your in front of your name doesn't constitute coaching to me. And I think the second biggest thing I found was that we tend to typically coach the way we learn, which brings me to this other part where we have to coach the learner. And we learn one way, the other person doesn't learn the same way we do. And my son, who has autism, that's where I realized I was like, all right, somebody might have ADD, somebody may have dyslexia, somebody may have a visual learner. So what we do is I recommend that everybody, one, takes a learning style assessment on their own so they understand their learning styles, because that's going to probably be your coaching style. 2 is then give every future applicant, and if it's too late and somebody's working for you, you give them. It's a simple 1-page, you can look them up, learning style assessment, and then find the right coach for that learning style. And then I tell everybody, I go, you may have 30 people you're training, and you can't train 30 people one way, but you can't also train 30 people 30 ways. But if you train, if your lesson is using the 3 hearing, seeing, and doing as your primary learning functions, if you designed a lesson plan, and it's funny, Jim, it goes back to something I learned from you years ago when you, if I'm not mistaken, but I think you designed the Hard Rock Cafe handbook to be a comic book. Is that right?
Yep, absolutely.
So instead of having text and graphs, you had a comic book. And that type of people in probably the Hard Rock are creative. They're artists. They're all right. So you designed a manual for that learning style.
Yeah. And
I think you want to train 30 people one time, 3 ways. If you can do that, I think you'll have it. So I think the people, they don't get it. I'm like, well, how did you teach them? Well, I showed them the P&L. Well, guess what? They may have dysgraphia. What's that? I go, it's the same thing as not being able to read, because and they're looking at, watch their breathing. Their breathing changed. They're getting blotchy. They're having a panic attack. So a lot of it is just learning style and not coaching the way you learn, but coaching the way they learn. And if you can master that, you're going to have so much more success in whatever you're teaching, whatever you're trying to accomplish. Parenting.
Yeah. And you're making a great point too. Yeah. I did convert a lot of those only because I wasn't going to read an entire novel of information. The manual was really boring. It was interesting information for me, but it was boring to sort of read. And my whole goal was to eliminate as many words as possible, which was a little taboo. I was almost going to be an English major. I love words in general, but the reality is that's not the way people learn today. I was already feeling like I was stepping out of my own generation because words and pictures together was all great. But today's generation, please. I mean, now it's not even pictures. I mean, you got to go video. You got to go TikTok or short form. It's got to be quick in and out. But at that time, and it wasn't just comic books. I thought about, an airline safety card, which has no words in it at all. I think about IKEA, their furniture instructions. There's no words in the thing. It's all visual. Think about Lego. When you buy Legos, there's no words in it. And I go, these guys are brilliant. They figured out that if I just use the visual, if you can get away with it, and you still can come over the top with some storytelling, especially if it's instructor led. But again, I think even the way that I grew up and what I was trying to do for those new hires 25, 30 years ago, even that doesn't necessarily work for today's audience. So you make a really good point. You're not going to be able to go after each one of them, right? But you can get the majority of the group, and maybe in the way that you're facilitating, you're doing 2 or 3 other things to make sure that you get the entire group to head toward the direction that you want.
Well, I think you guys are obviously music, rock, thoughts of rocks, and Brant. You know what you do, and I always think about when I was younger. My mom was a music teacher. I had a hard time reading music because I didn't know it at the time. All the little dots and the lines, they all look the same to me, and they all kind of blend. And the only way to be able to play something was if you learned how to read music. Now technology comes, and that note now is a color.
Yeah.
So this particular note is now yellow, and this particular note is now green. Now, conventional people may say, well, that's not learning how to write. I'm like, I just want to play because I want to enjoy playing music, right? So I can't play music because I can't read the language.
Yeah. Well, John, you've given us some amazing thoughts on developing leaders. What's the best way for people to stay in touch with you if they want to continue either via your podcast or the work you do with Jersey Mike's? What's the best way for them to stay in touch?
Yeah, the Jersey Mike's one's a little tricky only because, that's kind of a closed community with our franchisees, but I share both of your books. And a lot of other guys that I share them actually in class. We raffle off 3 books every week. I talk about your stuff. But I did start a thing called the Be Best You podcast, and it's not Jersey Mike's affiliated only because I wanted to just have a little bit of freedom to talk to other people and then be able to share my interviews. And I think, Jim, we had the opportunity. You were the second one. I think you were the first one, and Clint Pulver was the second. But so right now it's, I have to be honest, it'll be unveiled, but it'll be under Be Best You. We're on Spotify right now. We're on YouTube, and I'm going to be uploading there. So you can find it on Facebook, Be Best You Podcast. You can find it on Spotify right now, and then I'm working on how to get some more material out there. But and if I can leave this late, you guys will love this. But I interviewed a gentleman a couple of weeks ago where he said during COVID, his office closed. He took all of his material back to his office, and in doing that, he started unboxing his stuff, and he found all these notes from conferences and books he read, and he decided to consolidate it into one notebook. And then he said, "Wait, I'm going to make a book out of this, not for anybody else, but for himself." And he said this to me. He said, he goes, you have a job, you have a career, you have a passion. And if your passion can be your purpose, that's it. And I thought about it, and I said, I've had a job and a career, great career, still going. It's a project. It's a passion. But what I realized in that moment talking to him, I said, this is my purpose. My purpose is to just get out there and talk to people. And I think it's similar to yours, is just share and connect people to, be better versions of themselves. Right.
It's awesome, man. You're definitely one of the good ones. And like I said at the very beginning, we were so thrilled to just have you on the show. Not everybody that's listening are going to have people that report to them. They may not think of themselves as a leader, but one, I would say everybody's a leader. Everybody's watching you. And who knows, maybe you do get moved up or promoted into a leadership position. But even for those that are on the other end, you think about your brand, you think about your bosses, are they developing you? Some of it you're just gonna have to do on your own. But if somebody gives you an open window to start down a path where there can be a plan designed for them, they should take advantage of it. If for no other reason, it's not about the position, like you said, it's just a leadership skill. It's a responsibility that you're able to impact and influence other people. So, I hope our audience, regardless of wherever you are, I think there were some really good nuggets that you can glean from here. We'll have all this stuff in the show notes, but I know I don't need to speak for Brant. We're just thrilled, man, to have somebody like you on the show and just share a couple of those thoughts that are rattling around in your head, man. We appreciate it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot going on up there, so a little scary.
It's the best, man. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Rock on.
All right, man. No problem.
Hey, rock stars. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah, and listen, we know how busy you are, and grabbing those little nuggets of wisdom that can amp up your life are super hard to come by. So we hope this episode helped you enough for you to maybe subscribe and consider leaving us a rating and a review so that we can continue to grow the show.
Thoughts That Rock is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network and also supports Cannonball Kids Cancer and their fight for finding and funding treatment options for kids who have run out of options. They're amazing. Their work is incredible. To learn more, please go to cannonballkidscancer.org.
Finally, if you're interested in having Brant or Jim or both of us speak at your event, whether as a virtual webinar or an in-person conference keynote or mastermind, contact us directly at thoughtsthatrock.com.
Until next time,
Rock on!